You know, this is something I never would have thought to check, but the set screw offsets on these is a little bit random. You can see that those two aren't aligned, and these two really aren't aligned. Um, so I think I'm only going to use one because I'll be damned if I'm going to grind or mill specific to each individual bearing through the reinforcements now while you can see what I'm about to do, because otherwise you won't see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind here, and I'm going to take another strip of metal across and cap these ends. So that'll give me more welding space around, because really that's just welded on the top and soon to be on the bottom. And same thing for these. I'll grind all this weld down, and I'll grind all the weld down and put a plate over this and then weld it on additionally. So that way it has a layer of weld on the inside, and then that'll stop these. I mean, they're not really going to spread anyway, but I'll just seal that off. And I'll cut these down and grind them smooth. All right, just some little cleanups. So we went ahead and we milled a flat on there. Here's where the bearings lined up, so I came in just a little bit. That one turned out pretty good. In order to get an exact 90 degrees from the keyway, I basically put in the keyway, tightened it down, and then I just tightened the second set screw, and that gave me the marker of where that one will get tight by putting a blemish on the thing. So I did that to both of them. This one here, I actually goofed up a little bit. You can see how much deeper it is here than here. And that's what happens when you're not really paying attention and you leave a chip on your parallel, and this end was up just a little bit. I mean, it was all the way down, but it was resting on something. And this here, I wanted to get a little bit stronger, so I put a couple pieces of band on the end and welded that all the way around. So I think that'll probably be strong enough now. That little piece, this little piece here, I wish was just a little bit thicker than it is, but yeah, it'll be okay. Smoothed out all these, ground off the tops, put in our second thing. All right, last couple tweaks. We put in another plate here because we're not going to really be able to reach that hole without, it wouldn't be a very easy place to get. So I also braced it off the frame here, and we'll be welding something off of that. It'll just be easier. We kept the ends of these, not really for any strength reason, but just for like bees and, shit'll get in there and make a nest, and I don't really want to deal with that. And then we put in some corner gussets. I don't know if I need those. I probably don't, but, it doesn't cost me anything at this point, and it'd suck later, so. Just a little tip that when you're putting this all together, and when I was doing the welding too, it pays to build a spacer that's just the right height for it. Helps with everything. And here is my utter retard moment. When I milled this flat on the shaft, I had the gear on in the wrong orientation, so it's on the wrong side. So the big thick part of the gear is going to be here. So I think I still have enough adjustment. I think I'll be within the range, but it's going to be tight. I don't necessarily need to use the second set screw, or I can go in from the other side and thread and tap my own hole, which, I have to take it all apart again. It's just, didn't quite think that one through. Just did it. Well, looks like I made it just by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I had two washers on the inside originally, so I moved one to the outside, and looks like that'll work. I mean, worst case, I can also shave just a little bit off the back of that, but I don't think I need to. I think this will be okay. All right, and guys, welcome back. So I never talked about it yet, but this frame material I got was actually from like a roof rack off of a truck cap. So it's all just stuff I had laying around. The more I think about it, I'm going to need a pretty good clamp force on those, given that, all the forces that are going to be acting on it. And when I was tightening those, it just didn't feel like I could really get it tight. It felt like it was kind of staying at the same level of resistance, which would mean that this pipe might be crushing a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do, just to be safe, and because the next stage is to, lock these two together, in which case my alignment vertically is going to be important. So if I want to do anything to shore up the frame that's going to change the height, I got to do it now. So I think I'm going to take some of this material. It's not It's not the thickest, but it's not too bad. Between the two together, I think it'll be fine. So I think I'm going to take, I wouldn't want this any thicker for the majority of the metal, just for weight reasons. For frame strength, I think that's a fine thickness. It's just a matter of in those spots where it's going to be clamping, it might crush. So, yep, I got to take all those bolts out one more time and do the alignments, but I think it'll be worthwhile. All right, so I decided what I'm going to do. The 1/2 inch, I think, is just too big. I don't need it. 3/8, I'm going to bump it up because I need to buy longer bolts anyway. So I'm going to put one plate on the top, like so. Then I'm going to reinforce the sidewall just for shits and giggles because it doesn't take much. And then I still need to, drill a hole with these in the lathe. And then this other little hole that you see there is where I'm going to do a little bit of a plug weld just to keep it in there. That way there can be no crushing of this. I used a 3/4 inch plug because, well, I didn't have anything smaller. And if I ever need to, that will still support a 1/2 inch bolt if I need to go up to that size. So the reason I didn't do this to begin with is because I was hoping I could get away without it. Apparently not. So if you're not familiar with machine work, I'll just do a quick thing. I'm not gonna bore you watching me drill holes. So we put them in the lathe. First, we start with a center drill because it's nice and rigid and it won't wobble around like a small one will. Once we have the center marked, then we go ahead and we'll do a small bit. I have it on kind of a medium speed right now. I'll go in maybe about halfway with this one. I don't like to go much deeper. Then we'll go in with this one until it bottoms out. Then we'll go back to the smaller one and finish it through. This doesn't necessarily clear chips very well because it's so small. So if I go in much deeper than about, that, it's not really going to clear chips very well. And then I'll do the same thing with step drilling. I'll do one other size and then I'll do the final size. And the reason I'm not doing them all at once is because I'm going to change speeds in between. So I do everything on the one speed and then I'll switch over. And then I will do the facing to get those, to the finished diameter and the finished width. So that's the finished width right there. And this is already set to it. You can see how much I left on the bandsaw. We have just a tiny little bit to face. I know that my bandsaw cuts pretty square. So what I did was basically I just stuck the rod in here, my little sample piece, and then I marked it with a marker, and then I just hit the marker line, and that gives me enough to be able to, what'll give me enough to face off and not be deep inside it or anything. All right, so we're a little bit farther along. We've taken all of our plugs, we put them into the holes. We've used a center drill to drill these out. I did that because a regular drill bit probably would have broke a couple times, like here, where the just starts to go into the hole and hangs up. You can see that that hole might not always be perfectly centered. So after I pounded these in, I ran down through here with, it's a 64th over 3/8. That way the hole there definitely aligns because the big bit might walk just a little bit. Doesn't really matter for the bushings. We've got our cock plates all tacked into place, and I put the bolts down through the holes. I one still had a burr on it, but I put all the bolts down through the holes to make sure the alignment was right. I've tacked everything in place now. And then I'm going to take a bunch of and I'm going to reinforce the sides, which is pretty much overkill, but I'm going to do it. I could have used just a little bit thicker. I'm going to have to fill in the gap with weld just a little bit, but I figured that was kind of what I wanted to do. I could cut this with the bolt cutters, and I could pop these out really quick. If they were a little bit thicker, it would have been kind of a pain in the ass. So, a little bit more welding time, but also the gap will let the weld sit completely flush in there. So it'll be just fine. So we're going to do a little bit more welding, and then this frame shall be considered crush-proof. Other quick bit is you can see how it chamfered in there, and that lets me get a lot of heat down into the thing, build up the heat, and then run it over the corner of the thing. These aren't really for strength so much as just keeping that plug in there so it doesn't ever pop out. So that gives me like a place to do a nice plug weld and then run the weld into the side and not have it raised on the surface so I can grind it flat. All right, so if this crushes, I'm doing something seriously, seriously wrong. Um, so I think that this will be sufficient. It absolutely must be sufficient. It didn't really take that long. It was probably about 20 minutes of welding with all the pieces done. So maybe an hour, hour and a half to get everything together and get it assembled and welded in. Not too bad for the peace of mind. So now I'm going to grind everything down, get it flat on the bottom. The top should be good, just kind of rough thing. I may paint the frame or sections of the frame at this point because I'm going to do a little more welding up here and maybe back here. But for the most part, I think the frame is good. No, actually, that's a lie. I'm not going to do that because I still have the whole upper frame to build for the snowblower mount. So never mind. Okay. One other thing I noticed about the frame is because I'm using the chain from the snowblower that doesn't have a master link, it's like completely solid and they riveted everything together. The only sane way to get these motors in and out is, motors first, nothing else attached. And because we did that thing with a piece of wood going across and blocking it in two places so that, the motors are literally basically at this level, maybe just a little bit up. So it's really easy to bolt these motors in with the frame in this way. And we still have enough room to get the chain in here and around it. And then we just always have to take the tracks off, or I'll switch chains and put one in that has a master link. Doesn't really matter at this point. All right, next stage is how to prevent the frame from rotating about the axle. Right now we have it propped up in the back, and it's going to be kind of a balancing act between the front blower. You won't believe how much time I've actually spent thinking about this and everything that goes into it. So originally it just had a bar like this that went across, and it's actually pretty much the same distance, which is encouraging. But we're not going to use that in the back because our post is in right. There was a pin that went through there to lock it solid, and the front wasn't. The front just kept it from spreading outwards with that bar that I showed you. In the back, there was a pin so that those couldn't walk out, but also so that they couldn't rotate down. Now, because we have crap in the way back there, it's kind of tight in here. The original pin was here. We've already reinforced this thing because we didn't know what was going to happen yet. So the question is, I'm going to lock it down tight, and I'm going to do it in the front and the back because the back I can't really get a great. It's going to be hard to shore that up back there, and I have a lot of room in the front to shore it up. So I think what's going to happen, my best guess here, and I also have to leave room. See, the trick is I have to leave room to be able to get these tracks on and off, and with the chain without a master link, I could fix that. And I only have so much sliding, so whatever I do I have to leave some play. Like I can't make it tight, I can't weld it solid, in case I have to change anything, which of course you want to be able to do is take everything apart. So what I think I'm going to do is I made up a couple of these, and these are going to get welded into there. That'll reduce it down to 1/4 of an inch. The only reason it was so big before is because it was one giant bar that went across. They had to prevent for flexing. So when you don't know what your shape is going to look like, you start mocking it up with cardboard. And so I think what I'm going to do is weld that right about there. And I will weld one of these guys right in there. And I'll leave at least a 1/2 inch of spacing between the two. So that'll let me move the tracks. I mean, even if I adjust the chain tension, this gets moved relative to the frame. So, you have to have a gap in there. So I'll make up I'll have solid mount here, and then I'll make up the gap with spacers and a 1/4 inch bolt. So that'll be locked solid to the frame. I will have the frame 100% level when I do this. Because we had to remember how we had to add this spacing. We had to shore up the frame first so that these were up just a little bit to get our final height adjustment over here. So a lot of things to think about. And then in the back, so how do we shore this up? this is going to be in the back, and so this has to be on the back too, so that this can move back. If it was on the front, then it'd just hit this and we'd be jammed, and you'd have to cut things. So the next thing is how do we shore this up to bolt into this frame? And so this looks a little complicated, and it is, and I don't really want to have to make this, but it's not really that bad either. So I'll drill a couple holes in here. I do some plug welds onto the top of that. I'll leave about 1/2 inch, and it'll be sitting. You can see that those are sitting parallel. I'll just kind of weld them into place by eye. I'll take up the space with washers. I'll drill through this upright support with another 1/4 inch bolt and bolt those together. That should lock it in. And I think between coming all the way up here, because this is welded solid there, I think that'll give me enough support for the weight and the bracing on that, even though there's an overhang, and that'll get welded down here. And I think that will still leave me enough play on the bottom that I can rotate the track downward if I have to. It's a little bit of a contraption and a little bit complicated of a piece, but I think between these two, it'll be the cleanest way to shore that up. Because, things are tight in here and I don't really have great options. And I want to be able to do this without taking everything apart all the time, So yeah, that's where we're going. All right, so here's how the implementation came out. Instead of, where'd it go? I don't know. Template. Anyway, so instead of like cutting down a big piece, I just ended up welding together two. And what I did is I clamped the pieces together so I had the proper alignment with 5 washers in between. I used the bolt there to bolt them together. So we got both these set. I think those will all be strong enough. And then I've implemented one of the back ones so far. You can see all the plug welds that I did to the original piece. Again, we have 5 spacers worth of clearance. And I just bolted this piece right here to the thing with the washers in between. So that's how it turned out, nice and parallel. And so I think that will be strong enough. It's not the prettiest of implementations, but I think it'll be good. And we'll just drill a hole straight through there and put a bolt in. As I inspect this, one thing that I noticed, if I push down on this, I don't know if you can see it, but there is flex. And the flex is actually in this back plate back here. That plate right there. So those plates aren't really made to handle the weight that we're going to be putting on it. 2 car batteries, these 2 things. And maybe I should have just taken this entire old mount off and started from scratch or replaced that backing plate. It's too late for that now. I think it'll be okay because I'm sharing the weight, between the 4 mounts. And I can always brace. I can do bracing or something. We'll see if flex becomes a problem. Who knows? All right.